Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we'll be looking at two movies, the 1968 and the 2005 Mel Brooks classic, The Producers. With me are Ken.
What he did to Shakespeare, Booth did to Lincoln.
And Ted.
You know, Eric, not many people knew it, but the Fuhrer, a terrific dancer.
That's very interesting.
And a painter.
And you know what, Ken? Ted?
Yes.
Don't be stupid. Be a smarty. Come and join the Nazi party.
I don't think so.
That's right. We're talking Producers. So, Ted, give us the details of these movies, I should say.
Okay, since how we're doing both, I'll start off with the 1968 version. The Producers from 1968 was directed by Mel Brooks, was a screenplay by Mel Brooks. It had a running time of 88 minutes, a release date of March 18th, 1968. It had a budget of $941,000 and a box office gross of $1.6 million. It starred Zero Mostel as Max Bialystok, Gene Wilder as Leopold, Leo Bloom, Dick Shawn as Lorenzo Saint Dubois, Estelle Winwood as Hold Me, Touch Me, Christopher Hewitt as Roger Debris, Kenneth Mars as Franz Liebken, Lee Meredith as Ulla, Renee Taylor as Ava Braun, Andres Vustanis as Carmen Gia, David Pratch played Joseph Goebbels, Barney Martin played Hermann Goering, and Mel Brooks, in an uncredited role, was a singer in the Springtime for Hitler version, and he had a voiceover cameo.
Do we all know who Barney Martin is?
No.
That is Jerry Seinfeld's father on Seinfeld, the TV show.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
That's
very
weird, wild
cool
stuff.
He played Hermann Goering. There's not
Perfect.
much to say about that. And the reason I brought those two parts up is Goebbels and Goering. It's increasingly hard to find people who will actually star even in something funny as those real-life people. The Producers from 1968 has a critic score of a certified fresh 91%. It had an audience score of 85%. Now, it was very hard to find negative criticisms of the Producers from 1968. I did find Stanley Kaufman from The New Republic. He said the star not only indulges himself gluttonously, but the director seems to be doubled up with laughter at how funny he is being through Mostel, and the film bloats into sogginess. However, on the positive side, we have Susan Stark from the Detroit News. She said, "This shamelessly lowbrow, fearlessly satirical Brooks movie may just be Hollywood's ultimate satire, a furiously witty reduction in absurdum worthy of the great Augustins like Pope and Swift." Now, Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times, this was part of his great movie series, and he said of this, "This is one of the funniest movies to ever be made. To see it now is to understand that. To see it for the first time in 1968, when I did, was to witness audacity so liberating that not even There's Something About Mary rivals it. The movie was like a bomb going off inside the audience's sense of propriety. There is such a rhapsody in its heroes, such a gleeful fraud, such greed, such lust, such a willingness to compromise every principle that we cave in and go along." So, overwhelmingly positive. I mean, Roger Ebert included it in his Great Pictures series.
Actually, back in the day, though, this actually got mixed reviews because people didn't really know what to think of this movie when it first came out. But it was funny because what really put this on the map was Peter Sellers accidentally watched The Producers. They had some type of like a movie club that he was doing, and they were supposed to watch this one movie, but they didn't have it. And so they say, "Hey, I got this Producers film instead. You guys want to take a look at it?" It was actually at a real movie theater. And they're like, "Sure." And then Sellers loved it. And the next day put an article out in the paper telling everyone how much he adored the film. that put the stamp on approval, and then all of a sudden people started watching this movie.
There's no more higher praise as far as a comedic personality than Peter Sellers.
Especially during that time in his career, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because it ended up having to be re-released. Because it was released, but didn't do anything. And then after Peter Sellers saw it, then it was re-released. So.
Interesting.
And this is one of Mel Brooks' first movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, crazy.
So, now I have the producers from 2005. It was directed by Susan Stroman. It was a screenplay by Mel Brooks and Thomas Meehan. It's based off of the musical, The Producers, by Mel Brooks and Thomas Meehan. This has a running time of 134 minutes. It had a release date of December 16th, 2005. It had a budget of $45 million and a box office gross of 38.1.
Ouch.
Yes. And The Producers 2005 stars Nathan Lane as Max Bialystock, Matthew Broderick as Leopold Leo Bloom, both reprising their Tony-winning roles from Broadway, Uma Thurman as Ula, Will Ferrell as Franz Liebken, Gary Beach as Roger Debris, Roger Bart as Carmen Gia, John Lovitz as Mr. Marks, Michael McKeon as the prison trustee, David Huddleston as the judge, Richard Kind as the jury foreman. I mentioned him because he played Max Bialystock after Nathan Lane departed Broadway. And Mel Brooks stars as himself as the voices of Tom the Cat, Hilda the Pigeon, and the German Soldier. The Producers 2005 has a critic score of 51% splat. It has an audience score of 63%. We'll start with the positive reviews because these were much harder to find. The positive reviews, we have Richard Roper from Ebert and Roper. He said, it's a little jarring at first on film because it's so big and so broad and so over the top, but I like that. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times said of the 2005 movie, I know the 1968 movie The Producers virtually by heart, and it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. That makes it tricky for me to review this 2005 musical version, both because it's different and because so often it's the same. The new movie is a success that I know. How much of a success I cannot be sure. Someone who has seen the original once or twice or never would be a better judge. It is unfair to observe of Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick that they are not Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder. But there you have it. They're not. So, on the negative critics side, we were not without negative criticisms. I had to include 3 here because they're so scathing. Terry Lawson from the Detroit Free Press said, there are bad movies, there are terrible, misguided mistakes, and there are unbearable and embarrassing ordeals. The Producers, the movie musical, is all of those.
That's awesome.
Nick Shager from Slant Magazine said, it's hard to envision a worse big-budget film version of Mel Brooks' Tony Award-winning musical, The Producers, than this dreadfully lifeless affair. Kyle Smith of the New York Post probably has the worst. Mildness and blandness. Mugging like madness. Who knew that Rent would win in this fight? Murdering a genre's just not all right. So he decided to make a rhyme out of the whole thing.
The limerick there, how nice.
Those positive reviews were the best I could find. There are other positive reviews out there, but they seriously come off. It's amazing that they're considered positive reviews because they're so backhanded and they're so slanted to the negative that it's truly jarring. I mean, people really didn't like the 2005 version.
Now, they loved it on Broadway. 12 Tonys.
Oh, yeah. One person said that if you liked the Broadway musical, that the movie version acted like a virus and killed your love for it. That's what one of the guys said. They were brutal.
It's a tough movie to make. You're following up a classic, then it goes on Broadway and just breaks records
12
insanely.
12 Tonys, man.
Now you're going to make a movie that's really based off of that Broadway musical. It's a tough sell.
It's more difficult to do it than it is now. Like, for instance, we saw Hamilton recently film it as a play and put it out as a movie for everybody to see. Back in 2005, that was a harder thing to do, to get all those cameras to capture the play on film. It was really it was much harder to do. Mel Brooks' desire was not to have a big blockbuster hit with the producers as a film. He wanted to capture it because of how successful it was. He wanted it on film because Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick can't do their role forever. So he wanted to, under lock and key with a film. And so that's why it was made. It had some disadvantages in 2005. Now, if that film was being made, you had the advantages of all these different cameras and the way it could be shot. And you could just do an original performance and then have that be a major release on a streaming service and be very successful like Hamilton.
If you really get into it, a lot of the same criticisms were leveled at Chris Columbus when he put the movie version of Rent out. Like, the knives were out for him as well. Even though I tend to like the movie version of Rent, there's a lot of people that don't. And to a certain extent, even though that Anne Hathaway won Best Supporting Actor for her role as in Les Mis, the knives were out for that movie as well. I think this is kind of a trend, and it kind of has me worried about Wicked when it comes out, I think, next
the
year.
other one that comes to mind as well is one that I haven't seen a lot of musicals, but one musical that I have seen twice, and the movie, Phantom of the Opera.
Yep.
Phantom of the Opera is incredible to see. The movie was okay. It wasn't the worst thing, but obviously does not live up to the hype of the Broadway musical. And I think you fall into that category with the producers and other movies as well.
Don't forget Cats.
Don't
Well,
forget Cats.
we're purposely...
Don't.
We are purposely not even talking about Cats because that was such a tragedy.
Oh, I haven't
It
seen
makes
it,
the
but
producers look like Casablanca.
Casablanca, yes, exactly. That was the butt of jokes for like the late night shows for months.
When people are advocating you taking LSD and then watching it as being the only way it might be tolerable, that's not good.
Not good at all.
It is what it is. But I think, Ken, you're exactly right. I think what Mel Brooks would have wanted would have been the Hamilton treatment that it got in 2020. It was actually filmed towards the end of the original Broadway cast run. It's brilliant.
Mel's got nothing to be ashamed of.
He has nothing to apologize for in any sense of the word. But I think that's the kind of treatment that he wished
maybe life
it would have gotten.
But other than that, very few things to apologize for.
He should apologize for Life Stinks.
Yeah.
And maybe Dracula
hilarious.
Dead and Loving It. That one.
That one, yes. They can't all be gems, but most of them are.
He's got enough pelts on the wall.
And I don't even know if I'm going to even say that this is something to apologize for this movie. We'll get into our reviews on this later on, but I'll just tell you, I don't think it's as half bad as we're already making it out to be.
I'm just merely commenting on
critics
on
are
what
harsh on it.
The critics said, and just some observations that I had of other musical movies that critics are probably unduly harsh on.
They're going to be harsh on it for two big reasons. One, you have an original movie. And two, you have an original Broadway hit. So this had two strikes already against it. It's just not going to meet the expectations. You're going to have to try to not only beat the Broadway musical, you have to beat the original film with Gene Wilder to begin with.
It's really hard for musical movies. Like Steven Spielberg in West Side Story.
Yeah, definitely.
That was a really gutsy move that Spielberg took there because, that's one of, along with Sound of Music, one of the best movie musicals ever put on film.
And you had a big-time director there, and the critics were still pretty harsh on it.
It was nominated for Best Picture. I thought it was pretty good, but it's so very hard right nowadays because you are having to live up to the legacy of The Sound of Music and West Side Story and Oklahoma and all of those musicals that came out of the 50s Broadway and were put on film in the 60s.
I'll tell you, my favorite musical of all time, what I would love to see remade, is Guys and Dolls.
Oh, yeah.
That's incredible.
Because not only is
Guys and Guys,
not only is the musical really good, how can you top Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra in the movie version?
It's crazy. It's a winner. I'd love to see that remade. That one the critics would probably destroy. But
probably.
Let's move on here to the first time we actually saw these movies. I'll kick it off here. I saw the original in 1968. No, just kidding. I saw the original in high school when I saw most of my Mel Brooks movies. And I'll be honest, the second one, I probably saw it a couple years after it came out. I don't really remember exactly, and I haven't seen the movie probably in 20 years. Watching it again the last couple days definitely brought back some memories on the movie, but that's what I got. How about you, Ken?
The original one I saw roughly around 2001, 2002 because of the musical coming out. And I was like, wow, this Mel Brooks producer musical is out. I should check out the original film. So I went ahead and checked it out, and it definitely was something to behold. So the musical came out in 2005. I didn't see it until probably a year or two after that when it was available on paid cable. Probably around 2006, 2007, somewhere around there. I caught
Ken's favorite go-to for movies.
Yeah, especially back then. Yeah.
All right. How about you, Ted?
The original, it was probably high school as well. It's hard to really pinpoint when I saw the original. Being that I liked Gene Wilder, probably would have been around there. And then why my wife and I didn't see the 2005 version in the movie theater, I don't really know. It would have been when it first came out on DVD. I was when I seen it because I rented it. But based off of the fact that it lost money, I guess that we weren't the only ones that did that.
I don't think it lasted too long in the theater. It's one of those movies that was in maybe a couple weeks, didn't do too well, and just kind of faded off, which with big names. I mean, Matthew Broderick, Nathan Lane, Will Ferrell, who was top tier at the time for comedy. I think audiences really watched that movie and expected it to be more like the original, or maybe just the comparatives to the musical just weren't there. I don't know. Well, let's talk about the plots of these movies, because both movies have similar plots, but there are a few variances. Ken, tell us about them.
I'm going to go with the 1968 plot. They're both very similar, like we just said. There are some differences, but we'll talk about those differences during our discussion of the film, so I don't think that we need to do both plots. Max Bialystock is a Broadway producer past his prime who romances wealthy elderly women in exchange for money for a next play that may never be produced. Accountant Leo Bloom is a nervous young man prone to hysterics. He arrives at Max's office to audit his accounts and discovers a $2,000 discrepancy in the accounts of Max's last play. Max persuades Leo to hide the relatively minor fraud, and while shuffling numbers, Leo has a revelation. A producer can make a lot more money with a flop than a hit by overselling shares in the production, because no one will audit the books of a play presumed to have lost money. For the same reason, no duped investor will be aware of the many others, thus protecting the pair from charges of fraud. Max instantly puts his scheme into action. They will oversell shares on a massive scale and produce a play that will close on opening night, thus avoiding payouts and leaving the duo free to flee to Rio. Leo is afraid such a criminal adventure will fail and they will go to prison, but Max eventually convinces him that his current drab existence is no better than prison. The partners find the ideal play for their scheme, Springtime for Hitler. It is a love letter to Hitler, written in a total sincerity by a deranged ex-Nazi Franz Liebken. Max and Leo persuade Franz to sign over the stage rights, telling him that they want to show the world a positive representation of Hitler. Then, guarantee the show is a flop, they hire Roger Debris, a director whose plays close on the first day of rehearsal. The part of Hitler goes to a charismatic but barely coherent flower power hippie named Lorenzo Saint Dubois, also known as LSD, who had mistakenly wandered into the theater during the casting call. Max sells 25,000% of the play to his regular investors. At the theater's opening night, Max tries to ensure a truly terrible review by attempting to bribe the critic who came to see the show. As expected, the man is outraged. Max and Leo sneak off to a bar across the street to wait for the audience to storm out once they actually see the show. The play opens with a lavish production of the title song Springtime for Hitler, which celebrates Nazi Germany crushing Europe. The audience is horrified and rises in masses after the number. At this point, LSD comes on stage as Hitler, and it is evident from his beatnik-like portrayal that he has altered the script and directed the play as a satire. Meanwhile, LSD's portrayal of Hitler enrages and humiliates Franz, who, after dropping the curtain and rushes out on stage, confronts the audience and rants about the treatment of his beloved play. He is knocked out and removed from the stage, and the audience assumes that the rant was part of the act. To Max and Leo's shock and horror, Springtime for Hitler is declared a comic smash hit, which means that the investors will be expecting a larger financial return than can be paid out. A gun-wielding Franz confronts Max and Leo. The accusing them of breaking the Siegfried oath. He tries first to shoot them and then himself, but runs out of bullets. The three then decide to blow up the theater to end the production, but they are injured, arrested, tried, and found incredibly guilty. Before sentencing, Leo makes an impassioned statement praising Max for being his friend and changing his life. Max tells the judge they have learned their lesson. Max, Leo, and Franz are sent to the state penitentiary. There they produce a new musical called Prisoners of Love, a show which looks even worse than Springtime for Hitler, mostly because Leo and Max are striving to make a good play instead of a bad one. While Max and Franz earnestly supervise rehearsals, Leo continues their old scam, overselling shares of the play to their fellow prisoners and even to the warden. The song Prisoners of Love plays while the credits roll. The end.
Oh God, I love Prisoners of Love. I love that ending so much.
The beginning of the musical version, when they're singing that, reminds me of Singing in the Rain.
A little bit, right? Yeah, yes.
Where Gene Kelly does his big musical act towards the end. Gotta dance, gotta dance. When they were doing Prisoners of Love, I think they were like sing, sing. Is that what how they started it off?
Sing, sing, right.
Sing, sing. You know, it sounded just like that. And I was just like, they're ripping off Singing in the Rain. But I kind of appreciate it, though, at the same time.
Because it's the exact thing you would expect them to do.
This movie does seem to take a lot from Singing in the Rain. I don't know if that's by choice or not, but I felt like there were certain parts in there where I could see them trying to steal a little bit. Maybe stealing is a bad word. Paying homage to those musical.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Well, let's move on here. Let's talk about the movie. Let's what we're all here for, right? Let's talk about the movie. This movie kicks off with Max Białystok, played by the great Zero Mostal, and obviously in the 2005 version, it is played by Nathan Lane. So let's talk about some of the comparisons of these two characters, differences.
I would say the one thing that I do like about the 2005 version at the beginning over the original version is the opening act, where they're coming out and they're ripping on the play. Whereas in the original film, they go straight into the hug me, kiss me, whatever ladies, and he's already trying to like get away from the old lady that's trying to get him to do some sexual act with him. I kind of appreciate getting us into a little musical number before all that happens. So I do like that number. In fact, the one thing I'm disappointed in is in the deleted scenes, it's a little bit longer, and it's actually more true to the original play, which might be why critics didn't like this movie compared to the play, because there were some things that they pulled out because they don't want to overstate something because now you can physically see it. Whereas in play, you have just a stage. Whereas in the movie, you have multiple scenes and you have multiple locations, so you could show more things, so they don't want to repeat themselves. But in a way, that kind of takes away from people's experience of the play that come to see the movie.
I agree with you. That is one funny difference between the movies is Funny Boy, it just opens up. You're kind of seeing this movie. What is it, like a tribute to Hamlet or something?
Hamlet rip-off. Yeah.
Yeah. Rip-off called Funny Boy. And you're kind of like, Funny Boy, what the hell is that? And they're just like tearing it to shreds. I do like that. I think that opening is better. You hit that one right on, Ken.
This is going to be something this is probably going to be a running theme for me. I like how this sets up Max's character better than us jumping right into him wooing the ladies. Whereas you're establishing in the musical version that he's a colossal failure. Like, he had one major hit, and then it's just been failure after failure after failure. You don't really get that in the original movie.
Well, you do get it, but it's explained a few minutes in when...
right.
When Leo comes in and says, oh, I've loved you since whatever, 1946,
right.
when you did this. So it's explained, but it's not explained immediately on the opening.
Right, and it can be easily overlooked.
Sure.
Other than the fact that you get that he's down on his luck as a producer of musicals. But the musical version sets it up very well. As far as the music goes, this is also going to be a running theme for me. Some of the musical numbers I don't care for. It's just not my cup of tea. It was amazingly successful on Broadway. 12 Tonys can't lie. When you win that many Tonys, you've done something immensely correct. It's not my style of musical.
I like this first song, though.
It's okay.
It sets it up as, he's done it again. He's done it again. Like, what has he done? Oh, he's got this massive flop. Whereas if we didn't already see the original producers and didn't know what the producers were like, it sets it up as being that this is going to be another hit. But no, this is going to be another failure. But there are some better setups here in this movie, in the 2005 movie. Not saying that's a better movie, because I'm not saying that at all, or at least not yet. But like we're saying here for this scene at least, it sets it up. Whereas like the 1968, I'm a little weirded out a little bit about the old lady and the Max getting it on at the beginning of the film before Bloom shows up and kind of changes everything. So
but that's what he does, though.
That's what he does, but that's the first thing that we see.
We're jumping right into that.
It's a little awkward for me to see right at the beginning.
No, you're right, Ken. It's not just for you. It is rather awkward. It is an awkward place to be put. It's almost like we're being dropped right into the middle of a story that's going on. Like we had said, the introduction to kind of who the character is, works a little bit better. And I'll get into this more later, is exactly how I feel, because at 88 minutes, it's very, very concise, but it could have used a few more establishing scenes. That's all I'm saying here. But it is a very awkward interchange that he has with all of these elderly ladies.
And they're very energetic older ladies, too.
Yeah.
I believe the lady that was in the original, Estelle Winwood, I think she lived to be like 102. And I think at this particular time, I think she's like that age that they were looking for in the 80s. But she's energetic. She's really
into it.
Yeah, she's really into it. And in fact, both ladies, both the scenes are really into it. I gotta give them credit for their energetic performance, but it is awkward to see this. I'm very happy when the Leo Bloom character shows up, because I really don't want to see that. I just don't want to see this scene, probably at all. It doesn't do anything for me. I mean, it might do something for Eric, but it doesn't do anything for me, at least.
It doesn't do anything for me either.
Okay.
But I will say, when we're talking about believability, I have a very hard time believing Nathan Lane's character as Max Bialystok, and that will be my running thing throughout this movie. I don't get it. I really don't. And maybe that's going to be my bias with Zero Mostel playing it, who I think plays it to a T. I believe him as a low-rent, down on his luck producer who will stop at nothing and do anything to just gouge people out of money, knowing that there is no way in hell he is ever going to make a successful movie. And this is how he earns his living. It's sad as can be, but it's very believable with Zero Mostel.
Funny thing about the Max character is actually it's based off of a producer Mel Brooks worked for. So there's actually...
Sure, I can believe that.
So there was actually a producer that actually did these type of things.
Oh, I'm sure there were numerous ones.
I understand what you're saying to a certain extent, but also I think we're also looking at two different type of performances.
We are.
Where, Nathan Lane is a song and dance guy. He's the one that can pull that off much better because of that's, I think, his training.
Okay, all right. I'll give you that.
You're going up against the original. So every time I look at, let's say, these performances, I'm wondering if they're imitating the original actors, even with Matthew Broderick when it comes to Gene Wilder. There are just sometimes when I'm looking at these performances and go, are you just copying the performance of the original actor?
I saw that many times in this movie.
And that's unfair, though,
many
because,
times.
Again, it's a play, and the play should be portraying what the characters really are. It's really hard for them to make this an original part for themselves, especially if the lines are not being changed and the characters are staying exactly the same.
I will say this. I love Nathan Lane. I think he's amazing. I think his masterpiece is probably in The Birdcage.
Oh, Birdcage. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, too.
It's one of the best roles ever. But here, it's a tale of two Maxes. Eric, you're 100% correct. Zero Mostel's character, he feels as scummy as he looks.
He does, yes. That's a great way of saying it.
He comes off oily and
he's got the combed over hair
yep.
and the bad robes and yeah, exactly.
Yep. But Nathan Lane's Max is funny. He's more upbeat. His lines are delivered with that Nathan Lane side-eye glance that is kind of sarcastic. That makes Nathan Lane so great and really makes the two characters almost complete opposites. Because you never get the feeling that Nathan Lane's Max is oily and scummy, whereas Zero Mostel, he plays that 100%. this is one of the first points where it's like there's a really diametric difference between the two characters.
It's really hard because you've got that bias from the first movie. It's very hard to put that bias aside and watch the newer version of this movie, but it's impossible. You're always going to have it in the back of your mind. When I was watching this movie, I've watched this movie several times. The first time, obviously, yes, I was guilty of that. The second and third times I watched it, I said, okay, you know what, we're going to watch this just on the merit as if, okay, the 68 movie never existed. Try and focus on the characters, focus on the scenes, focus on the songs, focus on everything just in this movie. And it made a difference. But even by doing that, I still thought his character, and you described it very well, he was just too happy. Dare I say too gay happy, but he was just too positive. He just wasn't that sleazy.
He's Nathan Lane.
Not just because he's Nathan Lane, it's because in a musical,
you have to be happy.
You have to be upbeat.
I know.
Because you're doing these numbers, your character can't be this unlikable kind of guy because of the fact that he's going to be your main song and dance guy.
And I think I can't get past the fact that he's Nathan Lane and he's fun and he is happy. He's naturally that way. He comes off as himself. Yeah, it makes it very difficult. And it's
things that are
it's two different characters.
It is. And kind of moving on to two different characters, let's talk about Leo Bloom. I love Matthew Broderick as an actor. I think he does some incredible stuff. But in this movie, comparing him to Gene Wilder's character is like apples and oranges. Gene Wilder's character is believably neurotic and paranoid. I don't know, just I don't know how he even functions in life. Broderick's character, I'm going to say it, Ken. What am I going to say? One-dimensional.
I was going to say pathetic.
No, he's not pathetic.
I think he is pathetic. And real quick, here's why. Is because they make his character into more of a loser, I think, than they do with the Gene Wilder
Well,
character.
the song didn't help with Lovitz.
The
turning
song,
all of them into losers.
The first film, you have Max taking Leo out and trying to convince him by buying him a hot dog and seeing the sights and things like that.
That's how he's so sleazy, and that's what he does, right?
But here, instead, we have Leo who's so unsure of himself that he goes back to work and his boss tells him that he's a nobody and he's a loser. We don't get that in the film. We just get that he's a little off, hysterical. You know, he's
got some idiosyncrasies to him.
Yeah.
A few.
Yeah.
His blankie.
At the same time, he never comes across me being a loser. He comes across being a smart man who just has these weird obsessions that he has. Like you said, the idiosyncrasies.
Yeah.
He has a few of those where I just think Matthew Broderick's character is made to look like he's a loser, and the only way he's going to become not a loser is if he follows Max's advice. Leo also, in the musical version, shows more of that he loves plays and that he always wanted to be a producer, and so they give him a little bit more background on why he might want to switch. The best times I like Matthew Broderick in this film is musical performances. I think when he sings I Want to Be a Producer, I think he does a really great job. That part is where he shines.
That's where we differ, man. I don't think he can hold a tune. I can't stand him singing. And I know he's part of the original Broadway hit. Mm-hmm. I don't like him as a song and dance man. Nathan Lane, yes. Sing, dance, do everything. I can't fathom, I just can't see Matthew Broderick in this position. I know I'm in the minority, obviously, the Tonys say it all, but that's a huge negative.
Like I said, that some of the music is not necessarily my cup of tea. Obviously, for Eric, Matthew Broderick is not your cup of tea singing. I will say this, I do kind of agree with you. He's not what you would traditionally think of as the prototypical Broadway song and dance guy. I think he does a pretty decent job. I think you both brought something to the table here, and it's kind of where I fall. I get that Matthew Broderick's character comes off more whiny, he doesn't have a spine.
I think whiny is a good way to describe it.
I will say the part that I liked him the best is after he marries Ula. And he actually is standing on his own, and he has a backbone, and he starts to actually be a three-dimensional character. I don't know if Matthew Broderick was trying too hard to be Gene Wilder, but I have a feeling that that's kind of what we got.
It's tough shoes to fill.
It's massive shoes to fill. Over the next couple of movies, too, because we're going to continue with the Mel Brooks theme, Gene Wilder is perfect here. You believe that he's neurotic. He has more of a comedic timing to pull off this role and to play off of Zero Mostel's slimy character. He's one of a billion as far as when it comes to this, and he really plays this role perfectly. It's hard for Matthew Broderick to come into this. He's never going to live up to it. I think this is the most glaring part where you have the diametric of the two shows. You can't get it out of your mind. Like Eric, you said that with the Max character. For me, it's this character. I can't separate them.
With me, the difference between the two performances, I think Matthew Broderick is performing this like he's still in a play. Because there's play energy and then there's movie energy. And I think his delivery is still what he does in a play, which is probably needed in the play, but it comes off in the movie being a little bit too much. Like, for instance, he does the Gene Wilder thing when he's discovering that if he had a flop, you could really make a lot of money out of this.
Yeah.
And the way that Gene Wilder does it, it feels more natural. When Matthew Broderick does it, it doesn't come off natural at all. It seems
it doesn't come off subtle.
Yeah, that's exactly how I look at the performances. I will disagree with Eric. I think Matthew Broderick is fine as a singer. I'm not saying that he's the best singer in the world. I do like his voice. I do like him and Uma Thurman when they're together. You know, That Face. It's a fun little tune with her.
I don't know.
I mean, I agree with Ted. The songs are not perfect, and How Did It Win 12 Tonys is beyond me. But I don't think they're horrible songs.
There's a difference between a musical and a movie. The more songs you have in a musical, I think there's a lot more leeway and a lot more forgiveness, and people get wrapped up in the live event, going, downtown, getting dressed up, going out, seeing the Broadway musical live. They're all dolled up. They're all wrapped up in it. I think there's a little bit more forgiveness for songs that maybe don't click when you're looking at the whole picture. But when you're seeing a movie, it's a totally different energy. Totally different.
I will say this. As far as bringing up the Tonys differ from the Oscars in a major way. The Tonys tend to go where the money is. And The Producers was a runaway, massive Broadway hit. Broadway hadn't had a massive hit like that in quite a while. And this was a first in a string of major Broadway hits that really resurrected Broadway again to a new life. That's why they would have looked really hard at being a major Tony winner. It's not necessarily always the best musical that wins the Tony. They generally tend to go where the money is, whereas the Academy Awards, they go all over the place, and it's generally not the biggest box office hit that wins Best Picture, as we've seen numerous times. I do like what you said, Ken. I think that you're right. I think Matthew Broderick's character really comes off of the screen as playing to the back row, which is what you have to do when you're on stage. And it does come off kind of weird on the movie version.
Here's the other thing that's going against Matthew Broderick. He's Ferris Bueller. Whenever I see
True.
Matthew Broderick in a movie that's not Ferris Bueller, I'm still saying it's Ferris Bueller. Election, even though he's great in Election, I'm thinking that's Ferris Bueller as a teacher. And that's unfortunate because he is gifted. You could tell that he's worked really hard on this film and on the play because the dances and the songs and the requirements that he needs to do, that takes a lot of work. So I appreciate what he brings to the table. Like I said, there's just a different energy, a different approach on film. And I think Nathan Lane just is able to do it better. He's able to transition from film to the stage better. Both Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick's first love is the stage. They're stage actors.
There's a difference between being a play actor like Matthew Broderick and being a musical actor like Nathan Lane. And I think that's one of the places that you find a difference between the characters coming off as well. Let's not forget, though, too, when we're talking about Matthew Broderick, the Producers resurrected Matthew Broderick and put him back on the map. as much as we've kind of hammered him here, this was a star-making role for Matthew Broderick and has allowed him to have a massive Broadway success in plays and producing plays and everything on Broadway, except for he's not really been in any other musicals. It's just generally plays. He's become one of the it guys. I mean, you can kind of take what we say here is the proof is in the pudding that he was a success. But it still doesn't take away the fact that he's not Gene Wilder.
And that's unfortunate because, you know what, if this was original and we're not talking about the original producers, maybe we like it a little bit more.
Possibly.
Because I don't think his performance is bad. I just think his performance is somewhat of a carbon copy, and then he's trying to take it to 11. But he's falling short because that's not what we want. I mean, unfortunately, we want Gene Wilder.
Right.
I think the critics probably would have liked it a lot better, too, if they weren't doing a comparison.
I don't know,
but,
especially for the 2005 movie. I don't know what those critics would have really wanted.
I do like the fact that they give Leo the love interest with Ula.
You transitioned right to where I was trying to go here because we've bashed on poor Matthew Broderick a little hard. This is one of the things that I do like about the 2005 movie. Ula is a real character. You're right, Ken. Leo gets Ula. You would never think that Leo's character would get any sort of a love interest. He does get Ula, and I think that's one of the endearing parts of the whole thing, that he ends up getting the girl. Whereas Ula in the original show,
just eye candy.
She's just eye candy.
Yeah.
Ula Dance.
Ula Dance. That's right.
And Zero Mostel being the slimy guy that he plays, he basically, that's what he says. He's buying eye candy is what he's doing.
There's no relationship between her and Leo in the original film at all.
No, there's none. I think that is one of the really big positives that comes out of the musical version. I think Uma Thurman does good here. I saw a lot of places where she got really raked over the coals. Here again, she's not the best singer, but she's serviceable. She does what she's supposed to do, and I don't think she's terrible by any stretch of the imagination. She's very earnest in her character.
She is definitely a bright spot in the 2005 version of this movie. She's not eye candy. She is eye candy.
Yeah, she is.
Eye candy. Don't get me wrong, but she is not literally just one-dimensional eye candy who has like 3 phrases she says through the whole movie. She actually is a key member of this team. I do like that Matthew Broderick does get the love interest. And I was kind of thinking about this at the end, when they come back, they're all in their fur coats and everything, and and pretty much is laying it on to the judge, mercy of the court. And of course, they all go to jail, but she doesn't go to jail, does she?
No.
What happens to her?
She
waits it out.
Gets away.
She waits it out. Sure she does.
Don't forget, they're not in jail that long. They get out early because
they do.
Right.
Because they bring joy to the inmates and stuff.
Yes,
but
exactly.
I will disagree on one aspect. I love Uma Thurman here because she's Uma Thurman. She just glows when she's on the screen. I think there's just something about her that just makes me go...
Unless she's trying to cut your head off.
Her presence is great, but her singing is up and down. Like some songs, it's really nice, and some other ones, it's cringeworthy, unfortunately. Her acting is okay. It's not great, but it's her presence. It's the way that she holds herself up is why it works so well. And I wish there was a little bit more written into this musical, the struggle between Max and Leo for her attention. At the end, we see that Max is disappointed that Leo got the girl, but really there was no build-up for him to be disappointed and for us to be invested in that. If we would have seen a little bit more struggle between the two for her attention, then I would have probably appreciated that towards the end of, Max being depressed because Leo got the girl. I mean,
is he depressed because Leo got the girl, or is he depressed that Leo has turned his back on him?
I think both.
I got the impression he was more bummed and hurt that Leo had turned his back on him because when they were in this together. But
you also have to realize that before the play, him and Ula are making out before, he says good luck and all that. He is disappointed there and feels like Leo has stabbed him in the back by, moving on his girl. So I don't care about that because you didn't build any of that up. When they first introduced her, they talk about nothing's going to tear this relationship apart.
Right.
And then she walks in. But they don't really do a good job of playing off of that. Funny thing, though, when she walks into that door the first time, that King Lear poster right next
It follows her.
Yeah, the eyes follow her.
Nice.
The eyes move. It's pretty funny. If I was a poster, my eyes would probably follow her too. She's gorgeous, and I've always loved Uma Thurman. And there's just something about when she's in a movie, she just has this look about her. It's kind of like the Kate Hudson effect in Almost Famous. For whatever reason, when she's on the screen, you just can't take your eyes off of her. I'm not focused on the sexiness. It's their character. It's
the whole picture, baby.
And I'm not comparing the performance to Kate Hudson's performance in Almost Famous. That's a great performance, but it has a level of being focused on a particular character. And maybe that's because the other characters are not setting the bar as high as it could have been.
It's funny you mentioned that sight gag with the King Lear poster. I didn't catch that immediately. I caught it in the second watch. I didn't catch it in the first one. The movie itself obviously is based on Springtime for Hitler. So you have to talk about the crazy Nazi that is Franz Liebkind. Kenneth Mars, I think, played the part incredibly well as just a nut job ex-Nazi who his loyalties to the Fuhrer.
Is he ex?
I think he is. The movie's 68. We're talking 45, the end of the war. So we're talking 30 years, give or take? 20 something. So he's right around that time period. Yeah. Because remember at the end, he's like, or at the beginning, he's like, who are you? Like, he's just deported from Germany to the USA, or he's fled the country. I think he was an incredible character in this movie. I think he played the part well as just a nut job. I love Kenneth Mars. Obviously, we're going to see him in Young Frankenstein. He's
Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein. That's
Frankenstein.
Right. There are a lot of these actors, as we will find with Gene Wilder, are fixtures in Mel Brooks movies. The one bright point I will say about the '05 version, and it's not Will Ferrell. I'm not going to say he's the bright point. I think he's an utter train wreck playing this character. And I know he's hot shit in 2005. There's no other way to put it. You put him in it, people just going to the movie just for him to watch it. But I am a sucker for stupid sight gag. I love the pigeons in the movie. The pigeons doing their little song and dance and their little things. I actually just busted out laughing with the pigeons. That's how stupid I am.
And that's Mel Brooks doing the pigeon sounds.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know. It's great. But Will Ferrell, not so great. What do you guys think?
I agree with you, Eric. You're exactly right. Let's be perfectly honest. You hit the nail on the head. Why is Will Ferrell in this movie?
Because he's Will Ferrell.
It's because people will go to see the movie just because he's Will Ferrell. I have a feeling a lot of people would be very disappointed that he's not in the movie more, if that's why they went. He is all over the place here. Will Ferrell's hard to keep corralled normally. Here again, not the greatest singer. I'll forgive his singing. I think the singing is one of the best parts of his portrayal here. I think where he loses everything, the character really gets sold down the river because he does come in and try to shoot them, but it doesn't have the same intensity that Mars's character has.
Which
when
is
he
more of
comes
like a
into the
slapstick
office.
comedy routine.
Yeah,
Under the table, they're just like cowering, trying to reason with them. Yeah.
Right. You believe that Mars's Liebkind is going to shoot him, but Will Ferrell's character is just, it's all over the place.
It's written differently, too. The original version, all three of them go and try to blow up the theater. And in this version, they have the director and the assistant and, of course, Leo and Max there. And it comes out guns a-blazing and shooting and stuff like that. I actually kind of like Will Ferrell here. Not saying I think Kenneth Mars is doing a better job. I agree with you on that. I don't think he's a train wreck by any means. I kind of actually like him, especially with the pigeons on the rooftop. I think that whole scene with Will Ferrell works very well. Maybe after that, I don't really care for that character. And here's the other problem is you take away the LSD character.
And you pointed out something very well, Ken, that I did not catch, was the difference in years. 59 or late 50s to 68. That's a huge variance in decades. You've got your suit and ties of the late 50s, and then you got your hippy dippies of the late 60s. It's a totally different genre that I did not catch.
That is another reason why you have these different performances. And I think that's why 2005 suffers, because we love the LSD character in the original producers, and you took that away and you kind of combined it between two other characters, the director and Franz. I mean, then you made Franz break a leg, and then you make the director then be the actor, which I'm not sure if I think that works better or not.
It doesn't.
No, it didn't.
I think fits more of 2005 than it does, let's say, 1950s or even 1960s. I think it's almost like what in the 2000s. What would make this crazy? Well, let's put a gay character in there instead of a guy who is drugged out of his mind. 2022, I don't know if that plays as well now.
It probably doesn't hold up as well.
In a 134-minute movie or even play on Broadway musical, I don't know why you have to eliminate the LSD character. You make the director end up being the lead in the movie or in the play. I don't get that.
Weird because they gave
it is. It's very awkward.
They gave it to Franz originally, which, okay, maybe I see that because Franz is not an actor at all, and if you want your play not to succeed, you go with the guy who wrote it that has a love for Hitler. Maybe I can understand that, but it just doesn't work. I think that's where they do Will Ferrell a disservice here, is trying to make him into the lead actor.
It's trying too hard.
Yes. If there's a problem with this movie, it's trying too hard.
Right. And it really comes out here. Whereas the storytelling in the original is very concise, very good. It's the very tight story. This is where the 2005 musical version, it loses something because Franz, he wrote the thing. Why would he star in it? It doesn't make sense and it's never really explained. When they do explain why the director's taking over, I don't buy it at all. If we're making a musical about a musical that's supposedly accurate, where's his understudy? There would have been a backup plan. They wouldn't have just completely hands up in the air and forget it. There would have been an understudy. And I hate to say this because it's Mel Brooks, but it's kind of sloppy. Yes. And there's no sloppiness in the original.
What I miss about what's in the first movie that's not in the second movie here is Max and Leo go to the bar across the street waiting for them to come out and just torch the movie. Is those reactions when they find out that the play looks like it might be a hit. And then they come across the street and they have those sad, teary-eyed faces. That's important. And they took that all out. They took it all out and they went straight to the office to show us that they know now it's a hit. That's ridiculous. Took some things out that were really special about the first movie, and then you're inserting these ridiculous things in the second movie. I do actually think that Gary Beach, who plays Roger, I actually think he does a decent job. I have nothing against him and his performance at all.
Yeah, no, he does.
And I think it's kind of fun, the keep it gay, keep it gay, keep it gay kind of segment. It has its funny parts. I like the conga line, and they got the village people, there.
That's probably my favorite song.
But if you're going to do that, then allow him to be the actor to begin with. Don't make him the director, star of the play to start with. Don't make Will Ferrell your Hitler. I think that's just stupid. And so that's a knock on the play. That's how I would have done it, and then I think it would have been played off a little bit better.
I agree 100%.
I don't know if it was Mel Brooks. No, it wasn't Mel Brooks. It was the director of the 2005 film. She said that she went to a director's house one day, Broadway director's house, and he had his staff living there with him. And so that's how she got the idea of course, they probably didn't break out in song and say, keep it gay, keep it gay, keep it gay. But I think it's a fun little bit in there. And his assistant, I think that's Roger Bart, Carmen. They play off really well with each other. There's kind of a nice little balance. When I see them, especially when they're doing the rehearsals, and they're trying to get everybody on cue, and they're telling people to be quiet, and then you got these guys that are trying to play the role as Hitler. I like those things. I think you wanted too much of Will Ferrell here. I think if you left it up with just the rooftop, and then him just being in the background, what is wrong with him just coming out and saying, this is not the play I wrote, and get knocked out like Kenneth Mars did in the original?
Exactly.
You didn't really need it in this particular film.
Exactly. You've got Will Ferrell. You've got the name, and now we want to do more with him than what was originally written. That is a recipe for disaster every time you try to do something like that. And it turns into kind of sloppiness. I agree 100% with what you said, Ken. The Gary Beach section, and then leading up to the beginning of the musical, where they go through the testings of everybody, that's my favorite section of the musical part. The Let It Be Gay, I think that's my favorite song out of the whole thing. I think the whole section. I even like Matthew Broderick's character when he tries to explain everything that just happened to Nathan Lane. He goes, and there was a Indian, and there was a and there was a guy dressed in a construction outfit.
Yeah, that was funny. That was
the Village
funny.
People.
That is legitimately funny.
Yes.
I thoroughly enjoyed that section of the movie.
I agree. That was one of my favorites, too.
The look of Matthew Broderick's face when they're doing the conga line and and the Indian is telling him to come. He just has this look on his face. I loved it. Actually, I thought that was really funny. But I agree. Yeah. And then the next scene, he was like, and a really friendly Indian.
That's great.
But I think the performances are here. I just think there are just a few messed ups here and there. I don't like Nathan Lane in the prison doing his little musical thing there. I think that could have been cut. I know that he's depressed, and he said you could go straight to the trial because he already tells you in the trial how sad he is that he thought he had a friend that deserted him. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a little bit too much. Like you said earlier, I think when you go to a musical at a theater, there's a different expectation. When you go to a movie, I think you need your movie to be a little bit more tighter, a little bit more concise. Whereas in the play, you can be a little bit more because, you have intermissions, you have a break in between. You give you a chance for your audience to kind of take a break and get ready for the second half of the play. Whereas in a film, you're going straight on. So there needs to be some more things that need to be cut out. And I think if you cut out the couple of things that I just mentioned, I think you have a better movie.
I can't argue with what you said there. I think it's a different energy, too, that you need to bring to a musical on Broadway than you do to a movie, too. And I think that's a very delicate balance. It seems like that Matthew Broderick had a particular problem doing, and it seems like there may have been a couple of other people that reprised their roles that had a difficult time doing. It's unfortunate. It's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. It could have been a lot better.
I'm not sure if I really like the part where Max goes out and he collects all the checks from the old ladies. I'm not sure if I like all the ladies with their walkers and they're making the little sounds and things of that nature. I just think it just adds more and more time onto the movie that I don't know if I really need.
It's kind of lowbrow. It takes the original joke and tries to hammer it even further. It goes too far. But if we're talking about length of the movie, the length of the 2005 version of the movie is my biggest complaint about the whole thing. There's no reason that an 88-minute movie should be turned into a 2-hour and 20-minute musical. It's crazy because you're adding a lot of stuff. Now, granted, you're adding musical numbers, so that's going to add some time to it.
But you're adding a lot of fluff. A lot of fluff.
Yes.
Yes. That was one of my complaints, too. An hour 30 on the original, you might have been able to tack on 10 or 15 to that one for a little bit of more plot build-up. But this one, oh, yeah, it's just fluff.
That goes back again to what we said earlier about Mel Brooks and how he wanted a capsule for the musical. It works probably great as a play, but as a film, there's more hit and misses because of that.
Yeah.
There's certain things that play better on stage than they do in the movie. But you can't take them out if what your goal here is the capsule from Mel Brooks. If you were just making this as a good movie, it would have been a different approach. But you went in this to kind of try to get the essence of everything and get everything into a movie, and I think that's just really hard to do.
Well, we're just about to the end of talking about the producers here, but there's this one open question I think needs to be answered by all of us. What is our favorite scene in this movie or movies? Ted?
There would probably be two. I had mentioned that I really loved the Gary Beach musical number. One of the things that really it grabs me in both movies is the audience's reaction to Springtime for Hitler, because it's so offensive and so completely mind-blowing to think that you would sit down at a theater and see something like that is just completely mind-blowing. And then the complete and utter change they have when they realize that Hitler's gay.
He's a hipster doofus kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's like a mockery of the Fuhrer.
Exactly. Yeah. And then Franz's realization as to what's going on is pretty hilarious too, all in that section. So yeah, that's got to be it. Because Springtime for Hitler. Come on, man, it's hilarious.
Yeah, I'm with you. My favorite scene is Springtime for Hitler, the musical there. I love Dick Shawn's character. I love LSD in that. I love the reactions of the crowd just walking out and they think, oh, they've done it. It's the worst musical of all time. Let's go to the bar and celebrate. And they don't see him walk on and they don't see him like improvising
Right.
and the crowd is coming back and they love it. And then they're at the bar and people are coming in talking about it at the intermission, mind you. That's my favorite too. Dick Shawn is one of my favorites. I wouldn't consider him a main character. He's clearly supporting, obviously, in the first one only, but he's one of my favorites.
Both versions of Springtime for Hitler are really good. If I were to choose one or the other one, it would still be the original just because of it's almost kind of like a improv.
Yeah.
It's funnier than the musical where you have Gary Beach singing Hello Myself. It's still funny. It's still good. It's not as good as Dick Shawn's performance, but they're still probably the best ones. And I think the meeting with Max and Leo, and Max finds out about the blanket, the blue blanket, because we haven't talked about the blue blanket. You have to talk about the blue blanket when it comes to these movies because it's a central piece. That blue blanket is important. It gets thrown away, and then he gets it back. And Matthew Broderick's character is actually wearing the blue blanket in his outfit, like a handkerchief. I kind of like that. I kind of like that the blue blanket doesn't actually ever really go away. But
one of the funniest sight gags, though, too, is something that even the crowd wouldn't have seen in the theater. It makes me giggle every time, is the chorus girls that are all dressed as stormtroopers, but they're marching around in a swastika.
Right.
So the crowd wouldn't have noticed that, but they make sure to show that overhead view of what the chorus girls are really doing there. That makes me laugh, too.
Now tell me this. I think in the 2005 version, don't they show it on like almost a screen in the background at the same time that they're doing their dance? I almost feel like I remember them showing it on two different levels. And I swear I remember
drawing
seeing
a blank on that.
And now that I think about it, I'm like, there's no way in the 1950s you would really do something like that. As far as other favorite scenes, I already said one of my favorite scenes was in the original that was taken out of 2005 is when Max and Leo go across to the bar. And of course, they buy drinks for that one drunk guy, one loser guy. But then they find out that the play is a hit and their reactions. It's pure Gene Wilder right there when Gene Wilder finds out. And Max is trying to tell him, maybe it's not that play or maybe it's just those three people. Maybe everybody else hates it. I like that, and I hate the fact that it was taken out. I think to show that in kind of almost real time instead of watching the reactions when they come back into the office, I think that just took away from the movie. So that would be my least favorite part of the new movie is the fact that they took something I thought that was really special about the first one and they took it out.
I don't like that they made the office all white either.
I didn't mind that. That wasn't too bad. I like how he's like, she painted over the numbers. I thought that was kind of, that was improvised actually by Nathan Lane. That wasn't in the original script. There's just some things that were different. I mean, we looked at the original. Max throws coffee at the window because the window is so dirty and tries to wipe it up. That's where you come with, he's a little bit more scummier. He's a little bit more dirty. Whereas Nathan Lane, he looks like he probably did have a shower maybe in the last day or two. So there are big differences here. I guess it sounds like we're kind of ripping on the 2005 and that the original doesn't have any faults in it, but I do like some of the things that they did in this movie over the original, and that's setting things up a little bit better to understand things coming up. But the problem is it doesn't pay off. And so I think there's some things you could have taken from 2005 and placed it into 1968 to even make it even a better movie. And it probably would have only cost you about 5 to 10 more minutes. And you still would have been at like $1.40 for the original if you would have added those things.
Well, let's talk about our reviews. That's a good lead in there, Ken. Ted, tell us your thoughts on this one.
And this is probably going to be the subtitle of this particular episode is going to be I'm going to qualify things episode. And that's not going to change here. I love Nathan Lane. I like Matthew Broderick a lot. So I'll start with the 2005 version. There's a lot of things that I really do like about the 2005 version. Like I've said before, I'm going to be honest, some of the music is not for me. It's not my taste. Some of the music is kind of dated. So it doesn't really work for me, except for a couple of them really do. I really like the Keep It Gay section. I think that's very funny. And I like the fact that they established Ula as a real character, and she and Leo, they form a relationship. I think those two things are really good. There are things that work here, but for me, it's too long. There's too much. By eliminating a character and trying to shoehorn a major name into a role that wasn't written for that, it hurts the whole movie for me. Unfortunately, it's going to be compared always to the original, and there's no way they could recreate the original. The 2005 version for me is going to be a solid C. It's perfectly average. It might be something that I'll watch again. It's hard to say. Whereas when I reviewed the 1968 version, like Roger Ebert said, it's really timeless. It's one of the best comedies of all time. It's hilarious. It's so audacious, and Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder play their roles perfectly. While there are a couple of things that I would have liked to have seen taken from the 2005 version, I can't argue with the 1968 version. The 1968 version of The Producers for me is going to be a solid B+. I think it's hilarious. I absolutely adore Gene Wilder. I think the characters are better done in the 1968 version, so that's where I stand on the whole thing.
I agree with you, Ted. I'm going to keep my review kind of short and simple. The 68 version is one of my favorite comedies. I can watch it over again. It's a great movie to have in your collection. Very few flaws in this movie. I love all the characters. I think it flows well. Obviously, I have the bias because it's one of the movies I saw earlier in my life when it comes to Mel Brooks. For me, this one is a solid B+, maybe even a B++. It's like right there. It's a great movie. The 2005 version has a lot of holes. It's a different movie altogether in many ways based on the musical. I can't relate to the characters as much. I don't want to relate to the characters as much. I think Will Ferrell brings the movie down where he's brought in to actually bring people in. I don't think he did a very good job in it. I don't like all the musical songs in it, and I like musicals, don't get me wrong, but this one, it doesn't hit it for me. There are some positives. They do a better setup in some scenes than the original. Some of the sight gags, the pigeons. I'm a sucker for singing pigeons and stuff. I do like that. And there are a few catchy one-liners. The Springtime for Hitler version obviously does not hold up to the 68, but it's got some moments. It does. But overall for me, I'm probably not going to watch this again, which is sad because I like Will Ferrell, I like Nathan Lane, I like Matthew Broderick, but they just don't do it for me. This movie is C, borderline C-, but it did pick up a little bit the last times I watched it, so I'm going to go with a C on this one. I think I mirror yours right there, Ted. Ken, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you guys on the original movie. I think the performances by Zero and Gene Wilder are amazing, especially, and Dick Shawn. And I could add, of course, Kenneth Mars to that. So all four of those guys really bring their A game. And I'm a big Gene Wilder fan. Why this movie works so well is Gene Wilder, in my opinion, because Gene Wilder, his just mannerisms, how he approaches his character. Yeah, he has some weird obsessions with his blanket and, afraid of people getting too close to him. And when Max counts down the minute when he's trying to tell him what's wrong with the books and stuff like that. I love the reactions that Gene Wilder provides in those situations.
How about fat people falling on him? Just out of nowhere, he's like panicking.
You're going to jump on me? So, I mean...
See, Broderick didn't play that scene nearly as well. That's one of the scenes I was doing a comparative to, and it wasn't even close.
I think that, again, it comes to Matthew Broderick kind of imitating Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
And taking it up a step further because he's in a play. When you're in a play, you almost kind of have to be a little bit more stronger with your performance because everybody's eyes are watching and it's got to get all the way to the back row. If you don't have that vocal performance, it's going to land flat. But I think these guys bring their A game. I love the length of it. The ending... I prefer them trying to blow up the theater at the end instead of going straight from let's kill all the actors to being arrested. I like the fact that they tried to blow up the theater. I think that adds a little bit more to the film. I'm not sure why that wasn't part of the musical. I mean, it was already long enough as it is, I guess. The first movie, in my opinion, is a B plus. There are a couple of things that I think the 2005 movie has in it that would make it better, such as the beginning. And like I said, there were some deleted outtakes in the 2005 where I'm like, why did you take that out? That works so much better than what you kept in. I do like Nathan Lane, and I don't think Matthew Broderick does a bad job here. I think the problem is we're comparing him to Gene Wilder. I think it's easier for Nathan Lane to be compared to Zero, but it's much harder for Matthew Broderick to be compared to Gene Wilder. But at the same time, the performance is not as good as Gene Wilder. Let's be honest with that. I like his song and dance numbers. I particularly like I Want to Be a Producer. I think he does a really good job there. I like his scenes with Uma Thurman. Uma Thurman is definitely another reason what's a little bit better about this movie than the original. I disagree with Eric on Will Ferrell. I think Will Ferrell does okay here. As I stated earlier, if you would have just kept it to the rooftop scene, I think that would have been great. I think he does a fine job. I don't think him being Hitler was a smart move. I think it would have been better for him to see the reactions of the play being ruined. And that's what we liked about Kenneth Mars watching in the original. He sees what's going on to his beloved play, and he gets on stage and has to be knocked out. I think Will Ferrell's part was written badly. I'm not going to put that on Will Ferrell.
So less Will Ferrell.
Yeah, less Will Ferrell. And I really did like what Ted likes about 2005, the Keep It Gay. And Springtime for Hitler is still really good. And I kind of like the ending a little bit, like right at the end where we find out what happens to the producers. You know, we see Prisoners of Love actually being made into a play. I kind of like a little bit more of an ending there. After all that, I'm going to give it a B minus.
Wow, I didn't see that coming. Let me reiterate this here. B plus for the original, B minus for this one.
Yes, the B minus is closer to a C plus, whereas the original producers, it's closer to an A minus.
I said, a B plus plus.
I do think it just misses it being an A, because there are better films than the producers, and there's better films by Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks films, yeah. It's an elite group.
Well, when we're putting it in the Mel Brooks pantheon, we're going to talk about the two piece de resistance movies coming up.
Once again, another great lead-in. What is our next movie we're going to be seeing, Ken?
What's the 1974? I guess maybe it's controversial now. Well, it's controversial then. Blazing Saddles.
Oh, it's controversial.
Yeah.
I don't care what era you're in. It's controversial.
Blazing Saddles. Oh, yes.
With Gene Wilder.
This out.
Yes. It is a controversial movie, to say the least, in 74 and even today. One of the questions we will talk about and answer is the most obvious. Could you make Blazing Saddles in 2022? Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
We'll answer that question and many more on our next episode. Ted, where can they find us on the World Wide Web there?
We can be found on Twitter, as long as Twitter still exists.
For now, sure.
At @hookedon_movies. And whatever podcast version you're listening to us on, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, or Anchor, if you can, leave us a rating and review. It helps us get noticed. We'll hopefully end up at one point getting us to our goal of being able to be put onto Rotten Tomatoes as official critics.
Oh, that would be so cool.
I want to thank the people that are rating us on Good Pods, because I've been seeing those ratings and they've been leaving reviews for our podcast. We read those. We appreciate those. So I try to do my best to go on that site and respond to everybody that leaves us a review. We appreciate every listen. Believe me, we really do.
Yes, we do. What are they saying about us on Facebook?
Definitely join us on our Facebook page, which is Hooked on Movies. We do have articles that we talk about. We like to share our opinions about other things, and we'd like to recognize actors and directors and just movies that have been a big part of our life. And that's why we do this podcast.
Wonderful. And we appreciate all of you out there listening and hope you'll join us next episode when we look at the 1974 classic from Mel Brooks, Blazing Saddles. And as always, thank you for listening, everybody. I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11.
See you at the movies.
See you next time on Hooked on Movies.